Right. Well, again, I'm a practicing psychiatrist, and I think that I really believe in the advances of psychiatry. Our diagnoses are more precise. They get more precise with every volume of the diagnostic manual. Our treatments slowly get better over time. And I'm not adverse to saying that there are biological bases to mental illness. I'm part of a department that does a lot of fantastic research in brain imaging, scans, other kinds of genetic research that really looks at mental illness seemingly below the level of culture, context, race, ethnicity, at the level of brain structures that are seemingly the same in all people. And at the same time, I feel like there's a false divide, almost like you have to vote, is an illness biological or is it social or socially constructed? And I don't like that divide very much, because I think that all definitions of illness, and maybe particularly all definitions of psychiatric illness, are always both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Mental illness is a real thing. It has real material consequences for people who suffer from it. And at the same time, even the most biological finding reflects social context in very important ways. And so I think psychiatry is better off looking both at biology and at social context and really trying to think of the relationship between those. And I think doctors and patients are better off that way. We certainly know that depression is an illness. All you have to do is watch an antidepressant advertisement on television right now and think about why might it be that a person might see an ad like that. What are the forces that are leading them to go in and ask a doctor? In part, it might be that that ad speaks to some symptoms they're having that are chemical symptoms, but many of these ads play off of familiar cultural stereotypes about gender or parenting or social class, other kinds of things. And so I think doctors need to be aware both that depression, as one example, is an illness that has a chemical basis, but also is deeply embedded in cultural norms about gender, social class, race. So that would be one example. There's great work that's been done now on bipolar disorder by Emily Martin here at NYU, and looking at the kind of cultural basis of bipolar disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorder, after the show Monk, for instance, is something that there's a lot of popular conversation about. And so I think, again, it's true for all illness, but it's certainly true for psychiatric illness, that these illnesses often reflect cultural norms in addition to biological realities, and really we have to be fluent in both. Well, again, I think that we're making a mistake if we don't see that there's a cultural basis to many illnesses, not just psychiatric ones. Breast cancer would be one prevalent example right now, different kind of cultures surrounding it. If you don't understand the cultural meaning of an illness like that, you're gonna miss the boat, even if you're a great scientist. So I don't think it's the case that it's just psychiatric disorders, but we know from history that when we get the ultimate, cure for a particular illness or nail it down, it stops being a psychiatric illness, and then it's taken up by internal medicine, or we know, oh, it was just an iron imbalance, or it was a vitamin deficiency or something like that. That in a way it's taken away from psychiatry and taken to medicine. But I think that if you look at diagnostic rates and treatment rates in psychiatric disorders, it's even with all the controversy about SSRIs right now, the improvement rates are reasonably good compared to other medical specialties. And so I think it's always going to be a negotiation about what's the best way to understand psychiatric illness. But of course, the flip side of that is that there is this aura of it's something we don't know in a certain kind of way. And so psychiatry is always kind of fighting against that. And probably that's why we had a move toward saying things are solely biological in a certain kind of way, is to, rightly move toward a more scientific basis. Terrific. Well, I mean, there are really exciting things happening in genetics and neurobiology right now, and really looking at the ways in which different, not just illnesses, but social conditions and social pressures can actually lead to actual brain changes. There was a lot of promise in the development of pharmaceuticals, particularly with the advent of newer generation of antipsychotics and antidepressants. And we know from history that there's a kind of natural trajectory of the way that these medications come out and are accepted. So initially we say these are cures for everything under the sun, and there's this dramatic rise, and then we say, wait a minute, these don't work for anything, which I think is happening with the SSRI antidepressants right now, and then we kind of figure out a moderated use of, well, they're good for some conditions and not for others. And so, again, as I say, I think that there's a give and take that's part of the process, and part of it is based in science. But I also think, the 1990s were often called the decade of the brain in psychiatry, where we didn't need to worry about Freud or about gender, psychoanalysis, context. All these things were, in certain ways, kind of pitched out the window because we were going to get the answer to everything from brain scans. And I think psychiatry itself has come to, in a way like medications, a more moderated understanding of the brain itself is very important, but you don't really know anything about the brain unless you know about social context, expectations, stigmas, other kinds of things. And so hopefully these findings will continue to be understood in social contexts.